Hello guys, it's me Simo Orahara, and in this video I'm going to talk about the holy Zanpakuto in Bleach and in general about the holy treasures of Serity and its relationship to the power of the nobles and their control over the Soul Society. I'm personally preparing for a big topic about the nobles in a separate video, but since the holy Zanpakuto topic is related to it, I will talk about them a little bit more. So what do we mean by holy Zanpakuto? First of all, let's talk about the Zanpakuto itself. As it known, the Zanpakuto is considered a Shinigami weapon, and more than that, it represents his own identity. After the appearance of Nimaya, it turns out to us that in order to possess a Zanpakuto, a Shinigami needs to obtain an Asauchi, which is a sword without a name. And after that, they keep training and reverses the essence of their souls in that sword, which later appears in the form of a spirit's Zanpakuto with a name and power, etc. Now of course, the person responsible for making this Asauchi is the member of the Zero Squad, Uetsu Nimaya. So it's not possible for a Shinigami to have a Zanpakuto without already having an Asauchi. Even Ichigo, who is a rare special case, his Asauchi was the creature Shiro that was made in a similar way to Nimaya's making of Asauchi. And the second point is that it's rare to find a Shinigami who owns another Shinigami's Zanpakuto and uses his power. So that in the whole story of Bleach, there is only one case, which is Tosen's Zanpakuto. The Zanpakuto Suzumushi is a Zanpakuto that originally belonged to Tokunada's wife, Kakyo. But when she died, we saw in this scene Tosen carrying her Zanpakuto. Personally, I thought that perhaps Kaio's Zanpakuto was still in a state of Asauchi, a Zanpakuto without a name, and so Tosen was able to use it later by making it a Zanpakuto himself. But in the novel, it stated that Kakyo actually owned a Zanpakuto, and it was Suzumushi. And it was even confirmed that a technique like the one that Tosen used against Zaraki was originally Kakyo's. And this leads us to open the door to a question. Can a Shinigami possess another Shinigami's Zanpakuto and be able to use his abilities? The answer, in my opinion, is no, impossible. What happened to Tosen is a rare case, especially when we talk about a relationship like Tosen's relationship with Kakyo. It wasn't just a temporary relationship, but Tosen was abnormally attached to her. Tosen believes in all Kakyo's ideas and philosophy. Rather, his personal path all changed because of Kakyo. Therefore, it can be said that Suzumushi himself as a Zanpakuto spirit believed in Tosen as the heir of Kakyo's will. So he accepted Tosen as his holder. As for the normal case of Zanpakuto, it's not possible for this to happen in a way that actually makes a Shinigami use another Shinigami's Zanpakuto as if it were its true owner. Because the Zanpakuto, as we said, is a mirror of the Shinigami's soul, reflects the essence of his soul, and the strength of Zanpakuto is basically the power of communication and understanding each one of them. And even in the novel, there is a scene appeared of some of the assassins used in storing Zanpakuto from the Shinigami who died in the previous war against the Quincy. And we all know that the most of the Zanpakuto that the officers have are in the process of Asauchi. Therefore, what these assassins did is the same as what Zaraki did when he was a child. As mentioned by Nimaya, Zaraki stole an Asauchi from one of the dead officers, and on the basis of that, he was able to later have a Zanpakuto, because the Asauchi at that moment was just a Zanpakuto without a name that anyone can use and reflects their soul and form their own Zanpakuto by time. And so, it does not matter from where you will get the Asauchi, as long as it will remain with you, you will be able to make it your Zanpakuto with practice and time. But there is another type of Zanpakuto, breaks the well-known rules, which in my personal opinion has a special rules. It doesn't even follow the rules established by the Zanpakuto maker Nimaya. It is the holy Zanpakuto. Of course, the term holy was added by me because it suits the type of Zanpakuto, especially since Okitake pointed out that the Zanpakuto of the Issei clan was considered by Room 46 to be one of the holy treasures. Therefore, we can say a holy sword. And by revealing Kyurako's past and the secret of his Haori, we know that there are swords with extraordinary powers and owned by special families. And among these families was the Issei family, as now described her family as a family of priests. They don't have a Zanpakuto, but they have a Zanpakuto carried by their the head of the family and passed down from generation to generation. And this is the special point of this type of Zanpakuto. That is a Zanpakuto of a family and it passed down through generations. Hence the problem of whether it can be used by someone other than the owner of the original sword do not raise in this type of Zanpakuto, at least among family members, because Nanao, although she was not the head of the family, she was able to use the sword ability, and here we come to the abilities of the sword itself. Its abilities are also extraordinary and not like any Zanpakuto, and as Nanao describes the ability of the sword, she said that the sword has no blade. It's not meant to cut people, rather it receives the power of God and reverses it in all directions. And based on that concept, Nanao activated the sword's ability on Lilibaro. I frankly don't care about what happened in that battle. We may talk about it in another video. The most important thing that excited me the most was the existence of a sword with such power, because in the story it was mentioned that this sword was made to face a person with specifications of a certain god. And here the questions arises, why this family originally possessed this sword with such specifications? Because on this basis the sword's ability can also be used on Ryo himself, who is represented in the story of Bleach as the god of the worlds. And this is why I think that these swords are themselves secret weapons of some families, whether the 5 great noble families or special family like the Issei family. So they have either swords or special weapons which are amongst the holy treasures of the Serity, and they may use it against Ryo's enemies or anyone who threatens Serity's interests, or it can be used against Ryo himself, especially since we know what the nobles do to Ryo by sealed him and cut off his organs. So it is possible that they also had to create special weapons, including the Hakyoken sword. And in the novel also another sword was mentioned, which is the sword of Enrakyuten, the Zanpakuto of the great noble family Tsunayashiro. This sword, as described by Kyorako, is Tsunayashiro's trump card. It also shares many points with Hakyoken, including that it is inherited sword. It is passed from generation to generation through the head of the family, and it is also had qualitative abilities. Enrakyuten's ability is to copy all the Zanpakuto's previously observed abilities. So this Zanpakuto copied several techniques of many Zanpakuto, such as Senbon Zakara, Ryujin Jakka, the Zanpakuto of the 7th Kenpachi, Hainiko, Kyoka Suigetsu, and Wabisuke, and many other Zanpakutos. But in exchange for using the ability of this Zanpakuto, the more it uses it, the lesser the holder's lifespan becomes, and it has been described as a curse like the Hakyoken sword. As it is well known, Hakyoken makes all Issei men die after their marriage, and Nanao's mom attributed this curse to the Hakyoken sword, and she wanted to get rid of it by giving it to Kyorako, while the head of the Tsunayashiro family, when he owned Enrakyuten, he did not want to use it because of that curse that shortens life. So he decided to seal it in a far place until Tokunada stole it, ignoring the curse issue, in order to take advantage of its abilities, especially after the latter Zanpakuto was confiscated. So it becomes clear to us, little by little, how distinct these swords from other Zanpakutos owned by the rest of the ordinary Shinigami. When we talk about the Holy Zanpakuto, we are talking about first of a Zanpakuto that has no permanent master and can be used for generations. Thus we are talking about swords that may be thousands of years old. On the other side, and here lies the big problem, is that Kyorako in one of the paragraphs indicated that the 4 great noble families pass on the family's Zanpakuto from generation to generation. On this basis of these words, we only know the Tsunayashiro family's Zanpakuto, the Enrakyuten, and the Issei family. They are considered only a special family and not among the 4 great noble families. That's why, and as I said earlier, that the issue of the presence of private weapons in some families is possible thing and has several justifications. Therefore, it's okay to say that every great noble family, whether Kuchiki or Shohin or Tsunayashiro, as well the 4th noble family that we don't know its name, and even the Shiba family who was expelled, all these families own the family Zanpakuto, which has special abilities and a curse of its own. The problem now is that in the same paragraph, Kyorako mentioned the name Muramasa. He mentioned Muramasa in a mysterious context that make you think that is the holy sword of Kuchiki family. especially since Muramasa appears in the Zanpakuto arc filler as belonging to the son-in-law of Ginri Kuchiki. Or it may be understood in another context, which is that Kyorako mentioned Muramasa to only compare it to the ability of Enrakyuten, because Enrakyuten copies the abilities of the Zanpakuto, while Muramasa control it. So perhaps he mentioned Muramasa for comparison, especially since he didn't literally say Muramasa is the Zanpakuto of the Kuchiki family. In addition of that, the most mysterious thing is on what basis Kyorako mentioned Muramasa. For example, when he said Muramasa, did Kyorako think of the events of the filler arc, or is the Muramasa that Kyorako talking about is actually the Zanpakuto of Kuchiki family, but he spoke about it based on information he obtained from Rome 46 or from somewhere else? And his mention of Muramasa is far from the events that occurred in the filler arc. Therefore, it's not entirely clear on what basis Kyorako mentioned Muramasa. Is it really the Kuchiki family Zanpakuto or not? But overall, when we talk about the holy swords or the holy treasures, Rome 46 considers them important and punishable by death for anyone who steals them or even changes their place. And this indicates that the perception that the Gochi or even the Zero Squad are the source of strength of the Soul Society is a narrow perception. The nobles who live behind the wall of the Serity, among them are formed the members of Rome 46. They are the ones who appoint the supreme captains of the Gochi Squad, so they are strong part. They have a powerful weapons that can tip the balance of power. For example, it suffices to know that the definition that Kobo gave to the Shohin family as the guardians of the heavenly weapons of the realm, and they have weapons that have been identified as being specially given to them by Ryo. Of course, I wonder how Ryo gave them these weapons while he is in a stage between life and death, or it may be just ink on paper so that everyone keeps believing that Ryo is the one who owns everything. But we know that the nobles in the end manage things according to their desires by encapsulating them in a legal and systemic way that goes according to the hierarchy that says Ryo, then Zero Squad, then Rome 46, etc. And back to the holy swords, both of the four noble families or EC family, we don't know exactly whether they are ancient swords dated back to the time when the concept of Zanpakuto did not even exist, meaning that they are swords that have been made in a special ways that can be similar to magical ways. Therefore, they hold those curses, especially when we see, for example, the shape of Hakyoken looks like a sword that does not resemble the Shinigami swords that we know in their sealed form. So I say that the holy Zanpakuto may have been swords dated back for a time when the Zanpakuto had not yet invented, and when the Zanpakuto was invented, it was reformulated in order to give it the same name we know as Zanpakuto, with features unlike the rest. And this case can be similar to Ichimonji Zanpakuto. The latter, even in its sealed condition, does not look like the rest of the Zanpakuto we know. So, as a summary of this topic, I believe that the holy Zanpakuto or holy treasures of the Serity in general are the secret weapons of the nobles. They may use it either against those who want to disrupt the existing system or even against Ryo himself. Finally, guys, what do you think might be the rest of the holy Zanpakuto of the rest of the noble families? Tell me in the comments and see you in my next video.